Hello and welcome to another lecture in the Theology of the Trinity course. Today we're going to be talking about the first article that we're going to look at in the Summa Theologiae, Article 3 in the Prima Pars, which is on the simplicity of God. All right, so let's just dive right in. So, why is God simple? What does Aquinas mean by that? Briefly, in essence, what Aquinas is saying when he says that God is simple is that God is not made up of parts. That is, God is not something that we can, like, oh, there's that part of God. You know, the way you could, say, a person or a machine or any created thing. Where you can look at a tree, for instance, and say, there's its branches, there's the leaves, there's the nuts or the fruit, there's its bark. You know, a human being, there are the eyes, there's the nose. God can't be broken down in that way. Yes, there are three persons, three relations in God, but those aren't parts of God. There's not the Father part and the Son part and the Holy Spirit part. And so that's what Aquinas is saying when he says that God is simple. So we're looking at what's in Latin called the responsio, the response, the I answer that portion of the second question. So Aquinas says, I answer that it is impossible that matter should exist in God. First, because matter is in potentiality. But we have shown, in an above question and article, that God is pure act without any potentiality. Hence it is impossible that God should be composed of matter and form. Second, because everything composed of matter and form owes its perfection and goodness to its form. Therefore its goodness is participated, inasmuch as matter participates the form. Now the first good and the best, namely God, is not a participated good, because the essential good is prior to the participated good. Hence it is impossible that God should be composed of matter and form. Thirdly, because every agent acts by its form. Hence the manner in which it has its form is the manner in which it is an agent. Therefore, whatever is primarily and essentially an agent must primarily and essentially form. Now God is the first agent, since he is the first efficient cause. He is therefore of his essence a form, and not composed of matter and form. There's a lot going on here. Particularly, there's a lot of Aristotelian philosophy going on here. So let's get at some of that first. So the question, if you look at the text, the question that's being asked here is God composed of matter and form? Now, in Aristotelian philosophy, everything is made up of matter and form. Because form, so matter is the stuff, and form is what gives it, not just its shape, but how we identify it. It gives it kind of its purpose, its movement. So, for instance, we could say that the soul is the form of the body. So our body is our matter, right? It's what we're made of, to an extent. It's the thing that we can point to and touch. Our soul is what gives our body form. And that doesn't simply mean that it's what gives us fingers and toes and so on, but that it's what gives us, it's what distinguishes a human being from a rock or from a dog and so on. So that's the question he's asking. Is God made up of a matter and a form? And he's saying, no, God can't be matter and form. Well, why can't God be matter and form? Well, this first thing that he says is that God is pure act, and without any potentiality. Now, what that means is, again, in Aristotelian philosophy, there are a lot of, not quite dichotomies, but just kind of parallels, dualisms to an extent in Aristotelian philosophy. So, act and potential form another pairing. So, basically, there's this notion that we have potential to act, and we move forward from potential to act when we do something. So when I pick up this, it has the potential to fall. if I let go of it, and that potential will be changed into act when I let go, which I'm not going to do because I like this. God, on the other hand, has no potential. That is, there's no point at which he is not in action. So he is pure act. So for that reason, he's saying God can't be made up of matter and form because there's no change, there's no potential, there's no moving from one thing to another. He goes on then to say that all things that are composed of matter and form owe their perfection and goodness to their form. So in other words, what he's saying is the way that you can tell the way that you can tell a tree is good is based on its form. We recognize a good tree insofar as it coheres to kind of the form of a tree, which includes things like the ability to bear fruit or nuts, or however it produces its seeds, the ability to withstand the elements, and so on. And we can recognize all of that because of its form. But that's not how God works. God does not. So in other words, the goodness of a tree participates in its own form. But God, his goodness, the goodness that we, and perfection of God, doesn't participate in anything. It simply is. It is part of his essence. So that's why God can't be composed of matter and form. The third point that he talks about is essentially that everything he says, every agent acts by its form. In other words, everything that acts does so according and by its form. Whereas God does not act according to anything. He acts according to himself because, as he says in the 5 ways, God is the first agent. So essentially, think of it this way. He's saying that all created things act, they do things because something before them has done something. Right? We exist because our parents created us, and they exist because their parents, and so on. The kind of the efficient cause, the thing that brought me into being was my parents. And Aquinas will say in the 5 ways before this that can't go on indefinitely. You can't go on forever with efficient causes. So there must be one uncaused cause, and that's God. And because God is the uncaused cause, because there is nothing that causes God at all, whether to act or otherwise, God can't be made up of matter and form, because all things that are made up of matter and form have been caused, and work in what he's saying here according to their form. And God doesn't do that. So Aquinas then ends with this notion that God is in fact, he is just kind of pure form. There's no matter that the pure form of God informs, according to himself. It's a bit complicated, but essentially what we're getting at is that, and this is only one of the reasons why God must be simple, but he's not like everything else. Everything else that exists, everything that we encounter is composed of matter and form. God can't be, because he's the originator of all of those things, and therefore must be simple as regards being composed of matter and form. So again, it's about God not being made up of parts. All right. Let's go on to the next one, where we're going to talk a little bit about God's essence. All right, so he writes, I answer you. So the question that's being asked here is God his essence and his existence? And Aquinas says, I answer that God is not only his own essence, as shown in the preceding article, but also his own existence. This may be shown in several ways. First, whatever a thing has besides its essence must be caused either by the constituent principles of that essence, like a property that necessarily accompanies the species, as the faculty of laughing is proper to man, and is caused by the constituent principles of the species, or by some exterior agent, as heat is caused in water by fire. Therefore, if the existence of a thing differs from its essence, this existence must be caused either by some exterior agent or by its essential principles. Now, it is impossible for a thing's existence to be caused by its essential and constituent principles, for nothing can be the sufficient cause of its own existence, if its existence is caused. Therefore, that thing whose existence differs from its essence must have its existence caused by another. But this cannot be true of God, because we call God the first efficient cause. Therefore it is impossible that in God his existence should differ from his essence. Secondly, existence is that which makes every form or nature actual. For goodness and humanity are spoken of as actual only because they are spoken of as existing. Therefore existence must be compared to essence, if the latter is a distinct reality as actuality to potentiality. Therefore, since in God there is no potentiality, as shown above, it follows that in him essence does not differ from existence. Therefore his essence is his existence. Thirdly, because just as that which has fire but is not itself fire is on fire by participation, so that which has existence but is not existence is a being by participation. But God is his own existence, as shown above. If, therefore, he is not his own existence, he will not be essential, but participated being. He will not, therefore, be the first being, which is absurd. Therefore God is his own existence, and not merely his own essence. Alright, so let me try to break this down quickly and concisely. All things that exist, says Aquinas, exist by participation. That is, all things that exist are not the cause of their own existence. You did not make yourself come into existence. And insofar as your parents didn't make themselves come into existence, they also didn't make you come into existence. And so on and so forth. Same with a tree, or a rock, or a fish, or bird, or dog, or anything. Nothing created, says Aquinas, is the cause of its own existence. God is the cause of their existence. Therefore, nothing that is the cause of its own existence can have its essence arise out of its or cannot have its existence arise out of the constituent principles of that essence. So again, essentially he's saying a thing's essence can't come out of its constituent principles, the things that make it what it is, because no thing that exists on its own basis. All things that exist participate in God. God, therefore, his existence and essence must be the same. His essence must be his existence, because God doesn't participate in anything else. And this is really key for Aquinas. All things, according to Aquinas, insofar as they exist, participate in the true existent thing, namely God. God is the only thing who exists by his own principles. All other things exist by participating in him. If God didn't exist, if God's essence wasn't to exist, then God wouldn't have to exist. He wouldn't be necessary. He wouldn't be a necessary being, in other words. And therefore, God might not exist, and if God might not exist, then there was probably a time when God didn't exist. Therefore, God is not eternal, therefore God is not God. Okay? That's how this goes down. And so what he's trying to get at here is that God must be the source of his own existence, and therefore the source of his own essence. And again, so he's not subject to the dualism of essence and existence, and one being dependent on the other. or one arising out of the other. God's essence is his existence. All right. Last passage is going to bring in some things about Aristotelian philosophy, namely what are accidents. Again, we get another pairing here. We have accidents and substance, accidents and substance. So an accident is a thing that alters the appearance of a substance, but doesn't alter its essence. So in other words, I wear glasses. Those are accidental to me. They're not part of my substance. It's not part of my essential being that I wear glasses as a human. But nevertheless, they kind of adorn the substance. So we're asking the question then, are there accidents in God? Are there things that are just kind of adornments onto God, onto the substance of God? And Aquinas says, I answer that from all we have said, it is clear there can be no accident in God. First, because a subject is compared to its accidents as potentiality to actuality. Subject there you can also read as substance. For a subject is in some sense made actual by its accidents, but there can be no potentiality in God, as was shown. Secondly, because God is his own existence, as Boethius says, although every essence may have something superadded to it, this cannot apply to absolute being. Thus, a heated substance can have something extraneous to heat added to it, as whiteness, hence a white-hot flame. Nevertheless, absolute heat can have nothing else than heat. Thirdly, because what is essential is prior to what is accidental. Whereas God is absolute primal being, there can be in him nothing accidental. Neither can he have any essential accidents, as the capability of laughing is an essential accident of man, because such accidents are caused by the constituent principles of the subject. Now there can be nothing caused in God, since he is the first cause. Hence it follows that there is no accident in God. Again, what Aquinas is trying to hammer home here is that God isn't made up of parts, and that there's nothing comes to be in God. Nothing changes God. Nothing alters him in his essence. Everything that God is and does is essential to him. There are no parts that we could pick out. There are no parts that we could divide. There are no parts that we could leave off. There aren't even what he calls essential accidents. Like laughing is an essential part of being human, and yet it's nevertheless an accident. It's something that comes about to a human being. That isn't the case for God. And all of this is very important to understand as a foundation for talking about God as Trinity. That's why we're doing a whole week on questions like this. All right? We've definitely gone a little long, so I'm going to go ahead and end here. We'll come back and talk about the next passage for this set of readings. So that's Article 27 next time. All right. Bye.